And just while Julian is coming up, because Julian doesn't need any introduction, you maybe haven't seen me today unless you've been on Twitter, but Julian had two scenarios or situations for us. One was to be in a cage, and the other was to be in a prison, in the gaze and under constant surveillance in a sort of 1984 Big Brother type of situation. I have to say, I don't want to be in either of those two situations. I neither want to be Tweety Bird, afraid of Sylvester outside the cage, nor do I. And the last scenario we heard about was perhaps some of our colleagues who are in a daze because of their cognitive impairment. But Julian, I'd like you to give us a better option than either being in a cage or in a prison.
There isn't one. But there is a different way of going about it, I think. And that is that, trying not to oversimplify, the idea of there being one and moving to another is not true, and I hope that came across when we started this morning. The idea of moving to a gaze surveillance society has happened. It's happened around us. It's part of neoliberalism. It's part of a much wider social culture. And the analogy that's been used a lot today is the driver's license. I'm glad the pilots haven't been mentioned too often. I do love pilots, but I do get frustrated by the amount of aviation analogies. So let's carry on with driving. One way we've talked about, we've thought around assessing people, and EPAs might be an example of how you get to the point where you are competent enough and everyone can trust you to go off and drive your car. And you're not brilliant at that point, but you can carry on. And we don't question that unless you potentially have an accident. But there is already a change in how we drive. There are cameras everywhere watching how often you drive, how fast you go. It isn't just left to you to make the decision that you're going to stay within the speed limit. I don't know if you have this here, but Aviva is a major car insurance company, and they are now asking people to put boxes in their cars which will monitor your acceleration, braking, and speed rates, and uses GPS so that it's able to monitor how fast you're going compared to where you should be. Now, that's a voluntary thing, the idea being that you you put that in your car, and that then allows you to demonstrate that you are a responsible driver and you reduce your insurance premiums. And I think that last bit of analogy is where we are. The idea of wanting to buy the ticket and get on the bus is important, but that bus is going. That bus is going anyway. If we think about the analogy of the box in your car, we're being monitored anyway, but we can make decisions as citizens, and in this case as doctors, to actually be part of creating the future. So I'm not sure that it's a decision about one or the other. It's about our role in how we shape the future, and how we have to get on the bus, we have to get out of the cage, whatever analogy we want to do. We have to do that. And we heard some very powerful talks from various speakers about the influence that medicine still has, not just in healthcare, but beyond in society. And I think that was a really powerful thing for me, was the fact that actually we do have an opportunity to shape the future, not just in healthcare delivery, but more broadly. We do have a voice, and there is a risk that if we stay in the cage and hide, we lose our voice. But the idea that the bus isn't going to go, or the bus is going, and we have got to, we're probably running behind it already in order to try and jump on at the next stop. But we can't keep running on behind for too long. Sorry, that's not the answer you wanted, David. I do apologize.
Well, I guess it's my role in closing to really say what perhaps the imperatives are for us in Australia and New Zealand particularly, but for all our colleges in the next 12 months. And we've come here, we've had a very good meeting. We have been moved emotionally. We've been sometimes shamed. and we actually need to do something about what we've heard about. And I would say that for all our colleges, I would say, and looking forward to the next 12 months, imagine where we were, or remember where we were 12 months ago when we held this meeting. It was a week in which the RACS was under fire because of the bullying and harassment and sexual harassment going on in surgery. We set up an expert advisory group. In that year, we apologized for, in fact, the facts, the evidence that, in fact, these things are prevalent. And as Graham said earlier, they're prevalent for all our colleges. And every college that's done a survey have found much the same figures as us. So we all have a problem, even though each of us have to own up our individual problem. I would say in the next year, one of the priorities, if we want to maintain our professionalism that this group has often thought about, and our autonomy and our self-regulation, we actually have to make sure that our trainees and our junior doctors and all our fellows have a safe place of work where they're not discriminated against, where they're not bullied or sexually harassed. And there's been many failures, and the press are just waiting to jump on us. And it will be much, much better if we do it ourselves. But we can't sit back and wait for years. We have to do it in the next year and in the year beyond that. And it's also not cheap if you're going to put a lot of effort in. The second thing I think that we really need to address was something that was right at the beginning of Nicky Stamp's talk, that and we heard it from Nick Glasgow, our workplaces are toxic. And there are many doctors who are they have higher suicide rates, contemplation of suicide, substance abuse, and other mental health problems. And we have to do something about the fact that people can go to work and not find it a stressful experience any more than they would be going to any other place of work. We can't eradicate stress from the workplace, but we can do a lot to make sure that the way we train people, the way we supervise and support people is actually one in which we promote doctor well-being and mental health. And that was one of Nicky's points. Nicky made another point too. She says as a young fellow, she's struggling to know where her next job is going to be. And we have a tsunami of medical graduates coming through, and we have a number of workforce issues. And yesterday we were meeting with the National Medical Training Advisory Network to discuss anesthesia workforce issues. Psychiatry was last year. O&G and ophthalmology and radiology and emergency medicine are all going to be discussed, their workforce issues this year. We know we have enough specialists, but they're not well distributed in our countries. And there's still rural and regional areas are crying out for specialist doctors and can't necessarily get them. Our colleges are dependent on the STP program, or the Specialist Training Program, and we want to see that continue. We're still waiting to see what actually will come out there. And I would say also that we've recognized today that if we look at where we stand today, there is not enough cultural safety. And there is not enough embracing or fostering of diversity and of looking to our indigenous population and making sure that they have the same opportunities and chances as the rest of us to go into medical training, to specialize, and to serve throughout the country. So we've got a lot of work to do, and it may involve having indigenous health plans in your colleges and in your country, but again, it's not something you can wait and sit for other people to do. All of us as colleges will have to do it, and some things can be done together through the committees of presidents of medical colleges, but other things will have to be done by our colleges themselves. So I believe we have a great deal of work to do in the next 12 months, and when we leave here and come back and meet again in a year's time, I would sincerely hope that all of us will actually have a lot of runs on the board for, and we will have got on a number of different buses that I think have been outlined, and we'll be travelling on them. We won't have reached our destination in 12 months' time, but I think we'll have passed quite a few stops.